this webinar session now from the 25th of May. So this is actually the fifth session we are having. Just to kind of give a form of reiteration, and at the beginning of the webinar, the first session of the webinar series, we had a session on building and identifying and building the right ideas. The following session, we talked about identifying and building the right teams. Then we spoke about the marketing side of things. How do you identify the right audience that you want to reach out to, and how do you actually connect with them? Last week, we spoke about the finance side of things in terms of the financial instruments that you need to have, financial documents, your profit and loss account, your cash flow forecast, and so on and so forth. So those are the things that we've covered so far. Just kind of a recap as to why we are doing what we are doing. You know, one of the things that we have seen is that there is a huge gap in the job market, and that's because universities are producing graduates faster than jobs are being created. And our aim is to actually inspire enterprising people who have had the business idea or who are already working on creating a business, to provide them with the tools that they need to become successful entrepreneurs, so that they can actually create the jobs for the future. And that's our drive. That's what we are looking to achieve. And our commitment is that for any of the delegates who are participating in a webinar series, either vicariously through the recorded versions on YouTube and Facebook, if you are interested, we could work with you to help you to generate the seed capital you need to start up your business. So this is not just an educational webinar series alone, as much as we want you to imbibe the information that have been shared by all our formidable speakers. We also want you to actually take action. That's the most important aspect of the webinar. We just don't want you to listen. We want you to listen and run with what has been shared. So I've already covered what we've talked about in the previous webinars. So today we're going to be speaking about the compliance and the administration side of business formation. What are the things that you need to look into? What are the things that you need to put in place? So we've heard about the finance side, but now you need to talk about the compliance side, the administration side. How do you start up the business? How do you form the business, and things like that? And then also, we're going to be speaking about how we're going to be helping you to raise seed capitals, what is out there, both in the UK and in the US, and how we can help you to channel those resources. So so we're going to be having two topics today, the compliance and then the fundraising side of things. And next week, we're going to have our panelist session where we'll have a series of formidable entrepreneurs who are going to come on board to talk about how to build sustainable businesses in uncertain times. So that's something that we're eagerly looking forward to. And like I announced last week, please start sending in your questions now. Start sending your questions now so we can gather it together for the set webinar next week. Just to introduce our speaker for today, his name is Shayo Babatunde. He's the managing director for Ken Blue. He has a very strong legal background, very versed in all business areas of law and of commercial law. He knows about intellectual property law as well. So he knows all about, in terms of business law and company law, everything that you need to know, the nook and crannies of the things that you need to put in place. Is in the better position to give advice on that. He has supported Black businesses for the past 10 years to help them to start and grow their business. He's worked to support 1,000 startups, reaching trading and also securing funds for them as well. He is currently running a consulting service supporting startup business, and that's actually what Ken Blue does. And in addition to that, he also runs a school in Nigeria. So without further ado, I would like to pass it over to Mr. Shayo Babatunde. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Tolu. Thank you for having me, and good evening to everyone. This is really weird for me because it's like I can't see anybody. It's like so it's such a weird dynamic. But let us get right into it. So I'm going to quickly share my screen so you can see the slideshow. Fantastic. Tolu, since you're the only one that can talk, can you let me know if you can see that so I know?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic. So hopefully everyone else can see it. So guys, we're going to be talking about understanding company structures today, right? And as Tolu's already explained, my name is Shai Babatunde, and I'm the managing director of Ken Blue. And then he, read off a whole lot of fancy stuff that I've done that I'm not going to kind of hammer on about, but hopefully he's given you enough faith to trust that I know what I'm talking about when I'm about to start talking. So just very briefly, Ken Blue is a brand focused on supporting Black businesses primarily, created to provide services that help startups in 3 particular areas. So we focus on 3 main areas of marketing, compliance, and finance, which is part of the reason why we're here today, to talk about the compliance element of starting a business and the administration of work that is required and so on and so forth. Then we also provide in 3 main ways, and that's through information. So webinars and trainings like this, innovation, we do consultancy, and we sit down with people and we look at particular things that they need and particular services that they might want from us and we provide them. And integration, we have a range of networks that we kind of develop where we connect people to people who they might need and for services that they might want. So that's kind of like what we do. So I just wanted to give you a brief information about that. So as Tolu rightly mentioned, I've been working with startups for over 10 years, supporting and building brands across the board, so many different areas of business, so many different, like you can name any particular industry and we've done something with that industry one way or the other. And it's been a fantastic journey so far. So one of the things that we think we're very, very keen on within our community is the compliance element, because we meet so many people with fantastic ideas and fantastic visions. However, sometimes we get tripped up by the little things in compliance that we're not aware of. That makes sense. So this session is actually part of a wider training session I do, which I'm just going to give you quick information about it. So today we're talking about the basic structures. Now the reason why we're covering the basic structures and we're giving you some information about that is because we find that it helps you to make the right decision on what particular businesses you might want to start or how to start the business. So you know what's kind of involved and what level of effort is required, so you can work out what's the best, the most ideal idea or format for my particular idea. So the second session, which we won't be doing today, but if you want to know more about it, you can visit our website. We're focused on traders and the relationship we take, because that's a whole big issue that we needs to be covered, and the limited companies and the directors' duties. So as I mentioned, this is a part of the 3-part training that we do, and because of Tolu's allowed us to come here and give this particular session to you guys for free. Fantastic. If you want to know about what we're doing, just follow us on Insta or visit our website, which is just www.kenblue.com. So we're going to get right into it. So quick housekeeping rules. I believe the talk is about 45 minutes. So I'm going to be doing about half an hour to 35 minutes of quote unquote teaching or training questions. But there will be a space for questions at each interval. Some questions will go beyond the scope of what we're going to be discussing today. So I have to be very clear that I will not be able to answer every single question you ask. And also to point out that as I am neither a qualified solicitor or financial advisor, that whatever I say, whatever you take from today, you still need to do research for yourself, right? So don't just run away. Even if I was qualified, you still have to do research anyway. But I still want to mention that to make that very, very clear. That research always needs to be done on whatever you're hearing from anybody, because at the end of the day, whatever happens is always your responsibility. Last point is that the slides are not going to be available for you to quote unquote and things like that. So I suggest you get your pen and paper or your phone, whatever you've got, and you just make some detailed notes. Yeah. Pardon. I'm going to go straight into the purposes today. So today we're going to be looking at particular business structures within the UK that are available. So we're going to be looking at a range from public limited companies to partnerships, sole traders, various different options. And we're aimed at looking at what structure do you have for your business, or what options do you have, shall I say. So that's what we're going to be looking at, options for you. We're going to look at how these choices may impact your business. You know, how these choices will impact how you do your business, how you run your business, what paperwork is included or not included, and so on and so forth. What are the immediate implications of some of these choices? You know, is there anything that needs to be done straight away? And then again, how can I maximize the choice I make? So if you've already made a decision, you already have a company incorporated, or you already started trading, how can you maximize whatever position you're in? So that's hopefully what we're going to be looking at and focusing on today. Yeah. So at the bottom, if you notice, there's like a little mini map that I like to have on my presentations. And the mini maps, you know, we're going to go through the concept, as you can see at the bottom. Then we're going to talk about the systems. Then we're going to talk about the option. I'm going to explain that a bit more in detail. So first of all, let's just break down what a business is. So I got this from a fantastic book, and it says, so this is from the Zoom, that probably did something. So business is a system of operations that creates and delivers something of value that other people want or need at a price they're willing to pay, in a way that satisfies the customer's need and expectation, so that the business brings enough profit to make it worthwhile for the owner to continue operation. That is what a business is. So I've already isolated the particular elements that are important to highlight here. Systems, well, I crossed it out and said you are basically the system when you start. We have you, the value will be whatever your product or service provides. Then we have target market, or people, which would be your target market, for profit satisfaction if done correctly. So if you have a strong system, you have a strong value proposition, and you have a target market, you should be able to provide satisfaction and profit, right? So what we're going to be focusing on today is the U part, because of course we need to be focusing on how to maximize the U element. Because if the U part, product and service could be great, target market could be great, but then everything will crumble, if that makes sense. So that's the part we're trying to perfect today, understanding the best way for you to do your business. So we're looking at mode of business. So we often, at Kimberley, we often describe business like a journey, where we use it to kind of understand what's happening. And we do that because we believe when we're looking at business, you have your destination, which is basically your vision. You have the reason why you're traveling, which is basically, for lack of a better word, like your mission statement, your bigger picture. And then you have your car or your vehicle, which is basically whatever you use to get there, right? So whatever setup or structure that you have. So for a lot of people, they often know where they're going or how they want to get, for example. They have to know what they want to do. But what often happens is they're not too sure the best route to go. So just using traveling as an example, if you're traveling to a friend's wedding in Dubai with your family, or compare that to traveling to Scunthorpe for a work meeting. Although both things require traveling, they probably require very different vehicles, probably require very different things. Your mode of transport is going to be different. The size of transport is going to be different. The cost of transport is going to be different. And what you probably carry is going to be different. So it's important to kind of know where you're going and what you want to, why you're going there, to know what's the best method for you. Yeah. So this kind of changes the minimap a little bit. And what we do is we just dealt with the concept. Then we're looking at the terrain, because the best way to decide and to understand which company structure is best for you is to know where you're going and what terrain you're going to get through. If we're talking about the journey example again. So going back to the journey example, if someone said, hey, let's go to Dubai, all right, sure, how are we getting there? Let's get a boat. We'll probably be like, actually, I don't really have that kind of time, because I'm sure it's going to take a very long time to get to Dubai by boat, if that makes sense. So understanding where you're going and what you want to do there kind of helps you to work out what transport will be best for you. So look at the business terrain out there, the factors you have to consider, and then we're going to look at what vehicles you can use to get there. So then it kind of helps you to understand how you need to think about how you make that decision and how you kind of deal with your business administration and structures. Yeah. So overall, we're trying to look at when you know where you're trying to go and you know the best route to get there, what's the best vehicle to use to get there? And I guess that's the most simple way to put what we're looking at today. If there are any questions, I'm just going to give a second for any questions. I'm not sure how you want to do the questions, Tolu, but I'm just throwing it out there. If anyone has a question,
Yeah, sure. So just quickly come in there, and I'm sorry I didn't mention this earlier. So what we are actually recommending is that if you have any questions, please use the raise your hand feature. And what we want to do is to actually allow you to ask your questions directly. So once you do that, I would allow you to speak and you can ask your question. But if you otherwise, the other options we have, if you look at the either at the bottom of your screen or at the top of your screen, you should see a Q&A chat box. You can ask your questions in there, or you can use the chat as well to ask your questions as well. And then I would read them out at intervals. So please raise up your hand, and once Shaya is ready to take the questions, I would allow you to speak. Okay, continue, Shaya.
So what I'm actually going to do, since we've got a raise your hand feature, I'm actually going to make it a bit more interactive for everybody. So guys, I'm hoping you're going to respond by typing. Just so that I know you're there, just so that I know you're understanding what I'm saying. So just very quickly, and I'm still going to continue, so that not to delay, but I just want to make it clear. Does everybody understand what I'm talking about so far? Is it all making sense? How we're moving forward, is that clear so far? Or is there anything that anybody's unsure about in what I've said? Again, I tend to speak fast as well. It's a bad habit. So if I speak fast, Tolu, I can also see Mr. Faye is there as well. Just go like this, and I can see you guys, and I'll just slow down. So just to warn me if I'm going too fast, yeah. So we're gonna get straight into it. I can see chat, but it's struggling to find. Okay, yeah, all good so far. Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. All right, so when we're talking about terrain, we're talking about what factors do you need to consider when you're picking your particular business structure and you're trying to work out what's the best structure for you in developing your business. First thing we're looking at is legal structure. Legal structure poses the question, who and what is the business? What is this business made up of legally? Now, this is a very important question, even though it's a weird one to ask. And as we go through and we talk about it a bit more, it will become clearer as to why. The second thing is compliance. Who will you be reporting to? Again, that's another very important factor, because depending on which structure you have, will depend on how many hands will be in your soup. Because I can tell you, some of them have a lot of people involved, while others, you're riding solo, you're doing your thing and no one's really disturbing you. And that's the consideration. You have to consider what terrain you want when you're doing that as well. Next thing we're going to look at is tax. What taxes need to be paid and why? Very, very important element. After the tax, we're going to look at liability. Who is legally responsible if things go wrong? Then we're going to look at profit sharing. Is there any profit? If so, how is it to be shared? Can profit be raised? These are things that you have to consider and think about. Another terrain you have to think about. And the last is other factors. So other factors could be privacy. Some particular structures have more privacy than others. Number of founders. Some particular structures require a minimum number of founders or capital requirements. So there's different, right? So those are things we're going to go through. So we're going to go through the first one. And after each of these, I'm going to probably give you an opportunity to ask questions on each of them. So the first one we're talking about is legal structure. So legal structure asks what the business is directly, because it impacts how the business will engage with other businesses. Ask following questions for yourself. Am I the business? That's what we're trying to answer. Are you the business? Is it something else? Is somebody else the business? Is the business a separate legal entity that I work for? Who owns all the assets and the profits of the business? Who has power in decision making? And who is responsible for the business? So legal structure affects the answer to all of those questions. And of course, as you guys can imagine, those are very important questions to ask. You need to know who's got the power to make decisions. I have a client I was working with who started up a business with with a family member. And because of the legal structure, in the middle of it, one of the family members, who was their mum, in fact, wasn't able to do certain things that she thought she could do. And it's because the legal structure they chose, they weren't completely clear about. Does that make sense? So it's like I had to step in and kind of support and help them understand a bit more what the legal structure was, so they can understand how to navigate that particular relationship. So this is a very important question to answer and a particular area to understand. Legal structure also affects the relationship you have with your business. So we've got self-employed versus employed. Now, again, there's only 4 forms of employment or positions you can have in the UK. You know, you've got self-employed, you've got employed, you've got unemployed, you've got retired. So obviously, unemployed and retired, we're not talking about those today, so ignore those 2. But employed and self-employed are very, very important. Now, the reason why they're important is because I just want to quickly highlight 2 questions. I'm going to ask you guys 2 quick questions. I always ask people, what's the difference between somebody who's employed and somebody who is self-employed? Because a lot of people are always trying to work it out, like, am I employed, am I self-employed? Now, sometimes it's very obvious, because of course, you go in, you clock in at 9 o'clock, you know, you work in a bank, it's quite straightforward. But sometimes it's very, very murky. And the murkiness in this particular area also impacts how you have to run and the administration you do for your own business. So we want to make 2 things very, very clear when we're talking about legal structure. So the two primary things that HMRC and other bodies look at when they're talking about self-employed versus employed, outside of the contract you have, is who your contracts are with and what you're primarily being paid for. So I'm going to see if anybody would like to answer this question very quickly. When you are employed, who do you have contracts with, or who do you have a contract with when you're employed? When you're working for the bank, or you're working for Tesco, or you're working for wherever you're working for, who is your contract with? I'll just give anybody who wants to answer a couple of seconds to just type it. Fantastic. Mercy, my employer, 100%. Now, Mercy, I'm going to put you on the spot if you can answer this one for me as well. When you are self-employed, yep, thank you, Daniel. Yep, both correct. When you are self-employed, you have contracts with, or who's your contract with? So just to ask if anybody knows, if anybody's aware. Mercy, that's a very popular answer that people ask, but that's actually not correct, but that's very, people often say that. Does anybody else want to try? Who do self-employed people have contracts with? Bingo, Mercy, they're clients. So when you look at the difference, if you're a hairdresser, you work for, I'm just trying a random name, Tolu's Beauty, because I'm looking at Tolu now. You work for Tolu's Beauty. If you spend all day working and doing hair, and you burn somebody's arm, or you burn somebody's whatever, or you do something to someone's hair, they sue Tolu's Beauty, because technically it's Tolu's Beauty who employed you, it's Tolu's Beauty they're paying. However, when you're self-employed in a hairdresser or barber, and you've rented a chair, for example, and the person has a relationship with you, the contract is directly with you and them. Another question: if you're working under an employer but on commission, that's still it depends on the contract, but that will still usually be an employee. So even if you're not being paid a steady salary, if the contract you have is between yourself and your employer and not the client, you are technically self-employed. I'm sorry, you're technically employed. So that's one of the marks they look at: how many contracts you have. And I'm going to give you an example in a second to kind of drum this point home. Next thing is, can anybody tell me, what are you primarily being paid for? This is more tricky, so don't worry if you get this wrong. But when you're employed, what are you being paid for? Anybody can just throw that out there for me as well. Service. Mr. Femi got it right. You're actually being paid for your time. So I know you guys are saying my service, which is a good answer, don't get me wrong, but think about it. When you're employed, even if you're doing a bad job for a whole day or for a whole week, they can't just fire you. It depends on where you work. But generally, if people are following employment laws, they can't just fire you after a week of doing bad work. They have to do all these kind of extra things, and they have to do, what's the word? They can't say, I'm not going to pay you because we didn't like the work you did this week. So even though you're there for the service, they're actually paying you for your time, because if you decided not to show up to work for 1 week, they'll call it unpaid leave. So they'll deduct your payment for the time. So even if you sat in the office all day and you didn't do any work for the whole week, because you've given them your time, they still, well, depending on the way you work, like I said, usually they will still pay you. Whereas when you are self-employed, what you're being paid for is the result. So don't care, or depending on what you're doing most of the time, really, it doesn't matter how long you take, again, depending on what you're doing. If the result is on point, you'll usually get paid for it. But even if you take 5 years, or not even 5 years, 2 hours to do a particular job, if the job is not good, the person will refuse to pay. Sorry, Mr. Okay. Okay, so even if you've done a good job, most of the time the person will refuse to pay. So those are two things. The first one, to help you understand the position you're in when you're talking about working with the business. If you have multiple contracts with multiple people, that's one first indication that you're self-employed. And if they're paying you for the result and not your time primarily, that's another indication that you're self-employed. Now, the example I wanted to give you to point out to the question that was asked earlier about commission. If you get in an Uber and something goes wrong, who do you contact? Who do you pay? And who do you have a contract with? Uber. So I think about a year or two ago, there was a big issue because while Uber drivers are claiming to be self-employed, technically they weren't, because Uber drivers only have one contract for those who only do Uber. The contract was with Uber. When you get into an Uber driver's car, you actually have no contract with that driver directly, because if anything goes wrong, it's not the driver you call, it's Uber you call. If anything goes wrong, it's not the driver that's going to give you the money, it's Uber. When you're being paid, when you're paying, it's not the driver you pay, it's Uber. So that's another example of a situation where they were thought to be self-employed because of the nature of the business, but the government actually deemed them to be employed, and they started telling people to do this and do that. But all that happened was, I think Uber opened themselves up to let people register with other cab services. So now people they're on Ola, they're on Uber, they're on Bolt. So now technically the drivers have multiple contracts. So it's like they've kind of gotten out of that situation. But that's just a little example of how just those small details can actually impact how you're seen legally, which again, trust me, this is going to tie into what we're looking at when we're looking at the different options. Sorry, there's so much on my screen. There's videos, there's questions, there's my slideshow. So navigating can be a bit of a bother sometimes. So are there any more questions on legal structure? We're just talking about the general idea of understanding that we have to look at who the business is, who you are in the business, you know, what the business is and things like that. We have to look at those things. That's what legal structure covers. Compliance is the next thing, compliance and reporting. Compliance and reporting, we're looking at overseeing the smooth and legal progression of each particular structure. Every legal structure has its own rules and setups of operation, which is one of the main things we're going to be covering today. All of them have their own rules. So understanding what the rules are helps out which ones are best for you as a startup. It's important to understand who businesses have to report to and why they have to report to. And each particular business has a of compliance and has a different particular body they have to comply to. Compliance is very important as well, is because it impacts three main things. Finance. Compliance can cost money. Depending on the structure you have, will depend on how much your finance will cost. Expertise. Because of some requirements for various elements of compliance, some expertise is required while others are not in other areas. Again, it impacts money, but it also impacts the last element, time. So time as well is another factor we have to consider. Compliance can actually take your time. Certain administrative paperwork can take longer than others. Certain processes can take longer than others. So these are other things you have to consider. So far we've mentioned legal structure, we've mentioned compliance, and we're going to go to the next particular one, which is the one nobody likes, tax. Now, tax is another important terrain to consider. Now, there are two main groups of tax, right? There's tax paid as personal tax. That's things like, so there's tax you pay on your individual earnings, like income tax, national insurance. Those are highlighted because those are only two that we're going to probably touch on today. Sports and private, you know, when you bet and you get money, there's a stuff that's connected to that we're not talking about because it's beyond the scope of what we're looking at today. And then there's tax that you pay on what you own. So remember, there's tax you pay on money that comes in, and there's tax you pay on what you own. Again, this is going to be important when we're looking at the different structures. Tax you pay on what you own comes in the form of capital gains tax. Again, not really going to touch that today. dividend rates, which we are going to touch at some point today, and inheritance tax. Again, that's not something we're going to come across today, but yes, you get tax when you die. Yes, yes, yes. But again, that's a whole nother topic for another day. So that's the first group of tax. The second group of tax is tax paid to HMRC through a business. As a business, you pay tax on what you spend. So you pay tax, VAT, customs, fuel duty, things like that are tax you pay on what you spend. And then you pay tax on your business. Again, corporation tax, which we're going to cover and touch today a little bit, and capital gains tax. So again, understanding this will help you understand, depending on what structure you have, how much extra tax considerations you have to make. So again, I'm just laying the foundation. I'm letting you know about the different terrains you're going to have to encounter when you're looking at the business structure you want and how to manage your business structure. These are the different things you have to consider. What we're going to do in about another 5 to 10 minutes is we're going to look at the particular structures. And then we're going to look at the particular structures in conjunction with the terrain. So using my traveling example, it's like we're working out the different types of road and the different types of way to travel, and then we're going to say, hey, here's the vehicle, here's how this vehicle will fare on the road. I don't know if you guys ever watched Top Gear back in the day, where they'd like sit down and they drive cars and they'll tell this car's good for this particular road and so on and so forth. It's kind of like that. It's like a business Top Gear. All right, so the next thing is just going to very, very briefly mention some tax rates just to give you a bit more of an understanding. So income tax of 2009 to 2020. Boy, after this whole COVID-19, taxes look like but that's another topic for another day. But again, you have a personal allowance of 12,500. Then the basic tax rate is 20% for 12,500 to 50,000. Then you have a higher tax rate at 40% 50,000 to 150,000. Then an additional rate for 45% at 150,000. To make this very clear, that doesn't mean if you make 150,000 plus, you pay 45,000 on the whole amount. I'm sorry, you don't pay 45%, sorry, on the whole amount. You pay 45% on any amount above 150,000. The same way you pay 40% on any amount above 50,000. So it goes, the particular portions you have or you earn is how you are taxed. So just to make that slightly clear. Then to mention not income caps, to mention dividends, and I'm going to explain what these are in a short moment, but I have to show you the terrain. When you run the business like dividends, you have slight adjustments to tax rates. So you get additional 2,000, so your threshold becomes 14,500. Then your basic rate of all the, if you're on a basic rate and your dividend basic rate, those amounts will now be taxed at 7.5. Higher rate goes from 40% to 32.5. Additional rate goes from 45 to 38.1. Sorry. So again, pointing out the tax rates, and as I mentioned, this all make a bit more sense when we start looking at the different structures. But like I'm laying the foundation, I'm building the terrain for you. Very quickly, going to touch on NI. You have two types of NI when you're self-employed you need to pay, and you've got class 2, which is £3 per week, and you've got class 4, which is 9% on profits between 8,632 for any profits over 50,000. Yeah. So these are the tax realities. So again, as I mentioned, this will all make a lot more sense when we begin to look at the particular elements. And my lovely mum is calling me now. Love you, but sorry, not now. So the next thing we're looking at is liability. Now, liability is another way of saying, oh, my apologies. Anybody have any questions, sorry, on the tax slides? Does anybody have any questions on the tax slides? Is it clear what I was referring to? I know you may not know what dividends are, but we're going to explain that in a few. But aside from that, is there anything else that you may want to ask or touch on that particular topic? While you guys think about it, let me have a sip of mine. I don't know how pastors do it.
So no questions so far.
Yeah, that's fine. Oh no, they asked a few questions earlier that I answered, but no questions on these slides. So liability is another terrain we have to look at. Now, liability can be simply put as financial responsibility. In a business, depending on the industry, the levels of liability and exposure differ. And we're talking about the contractual liability, not criminal liability. So criminal liability, it doesn't matter what structure you've got. Criminal liability, if you do something bad and it's criminal, regardless of the structure, it's the same thing. But contractual liability is very different depending on what structure you have. And this is a very important thing to look at, because whatever particular industry you're going into, there are some industries that there are certain business structures that are standard because of the exposure and the risk. A domestic cleaner will be exposed to less liability and loss and damage, for example, than probably somebody who's doing something a bit more serious, like, sorry, not serious, apologies, don't mean serious, something a bit more heavy-handed, like dealing with people's taxes, like an accountant. If that makes sense. So the liability is going to be very, very different. If you contrast the damage that can happen when someone's cleaning the house compared to the damage that can happen when somebody has poorly constructed a building that delays the launch of a new business, the liability is very, very different. You know, if I clean someone's house and I break their TV, the liability is different from if I'm the person who's meant to set up the piping or the plumbing for the Apple Store when it's about to launch, and all of a sudden the week before the Apple Store launches there's a leak and it floods the whole Apple Store, so they're delayed by a month. The liability is going to be very, very different. So liability is looking at the responsibility and the financial obligation that the business or the individual has in any particular situation. So that's another thing we're going to look at. Again, does anybody have any questions on liability, or is that clear? If it's clear, guys, just please write all clear on the, just type all clear. Mercy, if you're still there, give me all clear. Daniel, if you're still there, give me the all clear, so I know we can keep moving on. Mr. Femi, I can see you there. If you're there, just give me the all clear. So, thank you. So the next thing we're looking at is profit sharing. Now, this is an interesting one, because depending again on what you're doing will depend on what profits look like. What actually constitutes profits? Different legal structures have different views on what profit is. Who do profits belong to? Again, different legal structures will tell you who profit belongs to and what capital can be raised. There are some legal structures that don't allow you to raise capital, or the traditional way, whereas there are some that are designed to allow you to raise capital. So these things will affect the administration you have to do, will affect everything on how the business runs. So that's particular thing on profit sharing. Another thing is, we're thinking about people who they need investment. Do you not need investment? Do we want funds for community? Do we want to use our funds for the community? Do we want to, different things you have to consider. Within the raising funds area, there's also the social optics. Certain opportunities to raise funds for certain businesses can be unattractive within this particular society. So for example, if somebody is trying to start a charity, for example, and they want to, but they've got a particular company structure that allows them to make money and make profits, but they want to do charitable work, that might not be very attractive to people who want to people who want to donate to the charitable work. So all of these things are serious and genuine considerations. So those are all of the particular areas that we're going to cover. Now we're going to have a look at each. Yeah. So, sorry, last thing, other factors, sorry. I skipped that myself. Industry standards, something we're going to be looking at. Industry standard is, sometimes you may want to have a particular business structure, but you have to consider, is it standard in your industry? Because some companies won't work with you if a structure is a bit out of the industry you're going in, unless you've got a good explanation for that. I've spoken to so many clients who they really want to do particular things, then I ask them about money, and then I find out they want to raise a lot of money, but the structure they're going for doesn't allow them to do so. So while they're going for an easier to manage structure, it limits how much funds they raise. As I mentioned earlier, social perception and also startup capital. That's another thing to consider. Some particular business structures, because of the costs to run them, require a certain amount of business capital investment to get going. So again, these are things that we're going to kind of touch on as we move forward. All right. So we're looking at the business. Now we're not going to compare each particular option to the terrain that we've looked at. So first things first. we have two main, lack of a better word, ways to run a, to run a small business. Or run a business, small or big. You can run your business as an individual, or you can run it as a corporation. Yeah. So first we're going to look at running a business as an individual or individuals, and you see what I mean. So first one, we've got the most obvious one, the most popular one, everybody loves it, sole trader. So the default position of self-employment. What I mean by that is if you remember what I was talking about before, if you have multiple contracts with multiple people, primarily for the result of what you're doing, whether you realize it or not, you are a sole trader, right? This is the default to begin to trade, whether or not you do any formal registration or not. Yeah, so you don't even have to. So for people, for example, who they may be at home, they may be just, may decided, actually, you know what, I'm going to bake cakes. And they put their stuff on Instagram and they start baking cakes and they start selling. They were a single father or mother who was working from home and decided to make cakes, while they were there. And as they were making those cakes, they began to gain a trader, even though they're still saying to themselves, oh, it's just a hobby. The fact that you've got multiple clients and they're paying you for the results and actually money's coming into your pocket, you're by default. So common titles for sole traders would be things like, people calling them freelancers or contractors, but these are usually, the same as trade. The way I like to describe a sole trader, and I'm going to talk about legal structure, is I'm going to bring it now. I need your interaction this time. So I'm going to mention a name, and I want to see if anybody knows who this person is. Does anybody know who Bruce Wayne is? Can you tell who Bruce Wayne is? I have just an excuse to drink. Bruce Wayne is. Who is he? Tell me who that guy is. Or what is he also known as? Well, you all left me. Okay, I'm not going forward until somebody else. I'm sure one of you know. The only reason I need to know they're still there. That's what I'm asking. So if anybody can, right now I'm just looking at myself. I'm looking at me and Tolu. That's all I'm looking at. I need to, so if anybody can just tell me who Bruce Wayne is. Oh, okay. Some of us don't know. Okay, no problem. Okay, Tolu, can you tell us who Bruce Wayne is? I can see your smiling, so you know.
Batman.
So Wayne is the name of Batman. So for those who hopefully we know who Batman is. And for those who don't know who Batman is a superhero. So he's a man who at nighttime dresses up and he's Batman. Now, knowing that Bruce Wayne is Batman, we know that if Batman gets hurt, who also gets hurt? Bruce Wayne. Because Bruce Wayne and Batman are one and the same. Why on earth am I talking about Batman in the middle of this session? Because that's how sole tradership works. When you're trading as, let's say your business is called Tolu's Beauty, that's like calling yourself Batman, but it's still you. You're just using a different name. The very important thing to point out is it lets you know that you are the business. So it's very important to have that in your mind that when you are a sole trader and you have a business, you are the business. So you don't have a business, but the business is you. And this will make sense when we begin to break things down more. So because you are the business, automatically, you are individually liable, personally liable for all of its debts. Because you are the business, you are the person who goes into contract with people. So you can say, hello, I'm going to provide terms with Beauty, but guess what? Tolu is also in that contract because Tolu is Tolu's Beauty. So that's the important thing to understand about the legal structure there. And that hinges on all of the elements. So because of that, liability is all you. The liability is 100% on you. Of course, you can get yourself insurance to cover that, which is a fantastic thing to do. But you all know how insurance works. You're covered until they tell you says you're not covered for. So it's not always the safest thing, even though you've got it. And then profit sharing. Profit belongs to you at the individual. So there isn't really any profit sharing per se. It's all yours because you are the sole trader. So Wayne again as an example, Batman. Batman is responsible for Bruce Wayne's. I mean, sorry, actually, Bruce Wayne is responsible for Batman's successes and years. So whatever happens with Batman, somebody's sorry. Bruce Wayne is also responsible. So you have to see yourself as the business. Next thing comes to clients. You usually submit a self-assessment to the HMRC. That can usually be done by individual. If you want, you can get an accountant, but it's usually simple enough, and a lot of people find it easy to do it for themselves. It's usually a simple form where you highlight all the money you've made versus all the money you've spent, and then they tell you how much tax you have to pay on the balance, which is your profit. Yeah, so it's usually quite straightforward, and you have to tax with. You complete that every year, and you have to pay your income tax on the profits, right? So if you remember the tax thing we looked at in particular earlier, with the 20% and the 40% and the 45%, that's how you'd have to pay tax as a sole trader. Now, the tricky thing about being a sole trader is, and again, if you speak to a finance expert or an accountant, they kind of support you to and everything is better. But if you made 50 grand that year and you decided 25 you wanted to put back into the business, guess what? You are concerned, even though you probably only took home 25 to spend on yourself and your family, you're still going to be taxed on the 50,000 because the business is you. So that's one of the nifty little things that pop up when you're trying to look at this particular option. Other factors to in a sole trader is that it's the only option for paying tax if you're not PAYE. Now, this is a very important point because it means if you're not going to be PAYE, you're going to have to be a sole trader in order to pay your tax. So sole trader is a very important thing to look at because 90% of the time, everybody who starts a business becomes one anyway because that's the only way to pay your tax. So again, we're going to look at companies, for example, like a limited company. But what you notice when we look at a limited company, unless you work for your company as PAYE, which you can set up, it means you have to be a limited company and a sole trader. So again, these are very important things to think about. It is minimal paperwork compared to the other options. It's standard practice for many industries, such as cleaners, hairdressers, plumbers, IT consultants, different, lots of people use sole traders because they have low exposure. If you think about hairdressers, plumbers, cleaners, the insurance covers them because they're not going to be sued for that much in most cases. Whereas there are some industries whereby they're not going to touch you if you come to a sole trader. You can do fashion and go to Topshop as a sole trader. They'll give you thumbs up and tell you to keep going your way. It doesn't even matter how much money you present to them. Because again, one of the main reasons why a lot of companies won't work with you if you're a sole trader is because as a sole trader, they can't find out. They don't know how much money you've got in the bank. They don't know how much money you own or how much assets you have. They can't check any of that because again, your tax details are private. It's a pretty standard practice to register as this when you start, and then when you begin to develop, you change something else. So it's still an option that a lot of people start with. But for this particular option, the administration is very, very minimal. But there is still administration. Does anybody have any questions on the sole trader option? And again, all clear from somebody, anybody? Just give me an all clear so I can move on. Okay enough. The next option is partnership. Now, is when you have multiple sole traders working together. Yeah. So it's still trading as an individual. And when we say traders as an individual, we mean you as the individual are the business. So the legal structure for partnerships is the individual is the business. So let's say Sandra and Spice Catering. This is essentially what happens when multiple. Can you explain this? Which particular element do you want me to explain? I can quickly run through it again, just as I mentioned here. If you have a look at the slides, I mentioned you guys are the business. So as a legal structure, you are the business is you. So your liability is unlimited. Whatever the business owes, you owe because you are the business. Which means you go into contracts with other people because you are the business. So you are responsible for whatever happens in the business personally, which means because you are the business, the profit belongs to you fully as well. Again, like I said, because you are the business. When it comes to reporting, you're reporting to HMRC and you're completing what's called a self-assessment at the end of every year, where you tell them what money's come in, what money's gone out, and then again, you pay your tax on that. So it's quite straightforward when you're a sole trader. You're taxed on your profits. You're taxed on your profits, which could be, which is whatever's left over essentially. And you're taxed on your profits wholly. So even if you don't necessarily spend all the profits yourself, maybe you want to invest some into buying vehicle for the business, maybe you want to invest some to get a building for the business, you're still going to be taxed on the profit. But like I said, accountants will help you to know the best way to navigate through that particular element. And I mentioned any particular factors. This is quite a standard area or standard option to choose when you're starting off, and you always have the option to change and to develop. If you're not going to be an employee of your own company or your own organization, you'd have to be a sole trader as well, because that's the only other way to pay your tax. And I said that it's very standard practice in many industries. So in many industries, sole trader is the way to go because it's how everybody kind of operates within that industry. Yeah. Hopefully, Daniel, that was clear. Let me know again if you have any particular questions on that, and I'll keep moving. So with a partnership, it's basically multiple sole traders that come together. So you have to have minimum 2 people to have a partnership. You can't have a partnership by yourself. And you are both the business. So when we look at liability again, both individuals are liable because they are the business. Profit sharing, the profits belong to the individuals again. So just like sole trader. So that's going to sound like I'm repeating myself. HMRC is who you have to contact again. You fill out a self-assessment. Then you have what's called a nominated partner. A nominated partner would have to submit something called a partnership tax return, right? Tax return, but you all have to pay your tax as individuals. So there is no tax you pay together, you pay them as individuals, but somebody has to kind of update HMRC on how the partnership is operating and working together. Partnerships to mention, you can actually become a part of a partnership without intention, as long as your intention is to share profits or the trade you do with somebody else. So you have to be very, very careful, because you can become a partnership without planning to. They look at what you're doing and what you call yourselves. That's very important to understand. Often lawyers would keep into debt by virtue of being partnership. So you have to be very careful. If you as a sole trader working closely with somebody else, and you as a sole trader end up owing money to a particular company and you can't pay it, they look around to see if there's anybody else by contact could be a partner, and they say, oh, well, you're a part of this business too, you owe the money as well. So be very, very careful and be aware of those particular things. It's quite difficult because, again, when you're a partnership, if you decide you want to leave, you actually have to dissolve the partnership unless you organize and you put them out. But most of the time it ends up dissolving unless there's an agreement to the contrary. And it's no longer a popular option because of the joint liability. So nobody really likes becoming partnerships because you're both liable. So as a sole trader, it's bad enough. You're liable for you make. When you're a partnership, you become liable for everything you and the person make. If they make a mistake on their own and it now causes some sort of liability, you both become personally liable. So again, as you can hear from the way I'm saying, any quick questions on partnerships? from an admin perspective in partnerships, again, it's very similar to sole trader, where it's just filling out a self-assessment with HMRC every year and just letting HMRC know when you started and when you stop. Just twice. You have to register as sole trader and then register the partnership, and then so it's quite straightforward, very simple. But again, although it's simple, it opens you up to risks you probably may not want. But again, we know the secret to dealing with some of those risks: insurance. Next thing we're going to look at is the liability partnerships. Now, with a limited liability partnership, with a limited liability partnership, I need you guys to follow me very carefully here, because we're now talking about business as a corporation. Remember, the first two options were business as an individual, which means you as the individual with a business. These next few options we're talking about, and this is how we're going to kind of finish it off. The next few options we're talking about is looking at businesses as a corporation. So first, we have limited liability partnerships, known as LLPs. This legal structure allows us to introduce the concept of a LLP is a partnership where two with an LLP, sorry, a partnership is where two people are regarded as a business, but an LLP means that there's a separate legal entity. As you can see in the slide, there's a separate legal entity, individuals in the business. So it's different from Batman. You're no longer Batman, Bruce Wayne in the business. Now you are an individual who is running this particular business. Yeah. So as a LLP, you are what's called designated members. But this entity doesn't own any assets or profits. Yeah. So although it's a separate legal entity, it's only a separate legal entity by name. It can't own anything. Liability is limited to the agreed when it was started. So if you decided to limit the liability to £5, that's what you need to do. If you limited it to £1, that's what it's going to be limited to, which is obviously the benefit. So it means, unlike a traditional partnership, if somebody kind of screws up and now you're being sued and your liability, there's things to pay to other people, it now means that you are protected because your liability is limited to the particular amount. Next, when we look at profit sharing, profits belong to the individuals. Does that make sense? So because it's a separate legal entity that can't own anything, it's just the name, the profits still belong to individuals, like a traditional partnership. So because there is no assets or profits, there's nothing you can sell to anybody else, right? So it means you can't raise capital in that particular way. So profit sharing, the profits belong to the individuals. And when it comes to raising capital, you can't actually raise capital by selling any stake in the LLP. When it comes to compliance, you register with HMRC for self-assessment, because again, you're almost a partner and a business at the same time, similar to what I was talking about earlier. And you have to register the LLP with Companies House as a separate legal entity. Every year you have to submit an annual return and submit annual accounts. This Companies House. Annual returns are often called confirmation statements, depending on who you're speaking to. But you're dealing with Companies House and HMRC when you're not a limited liability partnership. So again, we're now seeing there are more people involved compared to when you were a sole trader or a partnership. When it comes to tax, you're taxed based on the profits from trading, just like a limited company, not limited company, just like a sole trader and just like a partnership. Yeah? Hello? Created mainly limited, so it was created because partnerships were just getting too messy, and people still wanted to kind of partnership relationships because it's easy to start and stop without crazy liability that was just unlimited before. So that's why they were created. But when you're doing these, a partnership agreement is vital. So again, looking at the administration of these kind of businesses, you have to have that agreement in place. It's always best to get a drafting professional to support you in that process. And the partners are called designated members, so they're actually called partners. they're called designated members. Does anybody have any questions on limited liability partnerships, or am I boring you out of your minds? I know this stuff doesn't sound very fun, but I hope you guys are getting what I'm saying. I'm gonna give you guys a second or two if anybody has any questions. Anybody, thank you, JB. So yeah, so those are the options. Now let's get a little bit more complicated. Now we're going to talk about a limited company known as PLCs. The next few business options, the next two, they overlap. So I'm going to do them separately, but I'm going to repeat myself a few times because they're very, very similar. They overlap. So the next few options. I'll keep doing that. So when you start a private limited company or any form of limited company, which we're talking about now, they are separate legal entities which have the ability to do two main things: own assets, which means it can enter into contracts, which means it can own assets. When you have a limited liability partnership, because the partners were individuals who were entering into contracts, the only ones who could own the assets. Does that make sense? So if I enter into a contract now on behalf of my company, who's a limited liability partnership, the contract is between me and Tolu. So whatever money is made, whatever amount belongs to me because I'm an individual. However, when you're a public limited company, if I had a public limited company and I entered contract with Tolu, he'll be entering into contract with my business, which means wherever money comes through, whatever assets come from it, belong to the business. Yeah. So business exists in shares. So we now come to the concept of shares, which a lot of people know about and have heard about. It exists in the concept of shares. Now, shares are just the portions of business that exist based on whatever assets or profits it has, right? So if you have a business that has a car that's worth 10 grand and you have a 50% stake in that business, it means you have a 50% stake in that car. Which if you sold it for 10 grand, then you have 50% stake in 10 grand, which is £5,000. Yeah? When you're a public limited company or any type of limited company, what happens is you are a shareholder in the company when you start it, which means you have a contract with the company to own it in accordance with the shares, but you are not employed by the company. You just have a contract saying that you own however amount of shares you have in the company. So that's very clear. So that's the legal structure. When it comes to liability, because the company has the power to enter into contracts by itself, it is liable for its own debts. So again, using Batman the example, there's no longer Batman is Bruce Wayne and Bruce Wayne is Batman. No, there's a whole separate entity now that you are looking after and entering contracts to on its behalf. So if the contract fails, the company is responsible. Again, going back to my point earlier, this is only for contractual liability. And criminal liability will always be from a criminal perspective. However, contractually, it's got to be the responsibility of the business. There are ways that can be void depending on what you do, but those are quite extreme. There are things about fraud and negligence, a whole different ballgame. But just, I'm not trying to say literally, there's no way you can get yourself into any trouble. You can still, the general rule is any contract you enter into, unless it's explicitly said differently, you enter into as a business. So that business is liable for whatever goes wrong in that contract. Profit sharing. Because the business owns its assets as profit, the profits can only be distributed as dividends. You can't, like with a sole trader, if money comes in, you go to the shop and you can just spend the money that comes in as a sole trader because it's your money. You are the business. With a limited company, primarily talking about public limited company now, but any limited company, because it is not, because you are not the business, it is not your money directly. It's only your money by virtue of the shares you have in the business. So you may have a business and you own the shares in the business until you officially give the profit of that business to yourself as a shareholder, you're not, when I say you're not allowed, of course, if you've got a bank card, you can touch it, but legally, you're not meant to touch that money. So profits get distributed as dividends, and then you're taxed on dividends. So if you remember, guys, when we were looking at tax before, there was income tax rates and then there was dividend rates, right? So the dividend rates apply to people who take the money out of the business as a dividend, but that attracts a lot of, well, not a lot, but it attracts paperwork compared to being a sole trader. All you've got to do is declare what you've got, declare what's left over, and sorry, what you spent, what came in, and whatever's left over, you can spend freely. Oh, actually, no, you pay tax first, then you spend the rest freely. So hopefully that's been made clear. The next thing is you can raise capital. Now, the easiest structure that you can raise capital with is a public liability company, because it's a public liability, a public limited company, not public liability, wrong choice of words. Because you have it's a limited company and it's public, that means it trades itself on the stock market. So you can go to the stock market today and you'll see Lloyds PLC, you'll see Barclays, you'll see Boohoo, you'll see ITV, you'll see Vodafone. These are all public limited companies. They've put themselves out there for anyone to buy shares. So anyone can be a shareholder, anyone can have a stake in a company, and then that can help the company to raise capital. But again, as I said, because the shares belong to everybody who has a stake in the business, you as the person involved can't just take the money out and say, I'm going to spend money. It's not how it works. Yeah. When it comes to reporting, you have to report and compliance. There's quite a few things. So this is the extras that depends on what you're trying to go for. So you have to register and you're monitored by Companies House. So there's also a lot of compliance when you're a public limited company. There's ethical, there's corporate governance. You have to make sure you're operating in a particular way that's good for society, yada, yada, yada. So it's like, there's quite a lot more red tape, as we like to call it, when you're a public limited company. You have to have a minimum 2 shareholders to start a public limited company. You have to have £50,000 shares to even start. So there's a minimum requirement of capital you must have. I think physically you have to have 12.5, literally, but in total you have to have £50,000 worth of shares issued. Sorry. Sorry, I just swallowed a lot of air just there. Sorry. And your accounts need to be submitted to the HMRC, but they must be done by an accountant. So you couldn't just get your accounts done by a friend of yours. It has to be done by an accountant. And again, you have to pay tax to HMRC when looking at tax, and you have to pay dividend tax if you're taking dividends from the public limited company. Corporation tax is 19% of whatever your profits are. That's the current rate. And I already mentioned the rates earlier. Other factors to consider when we're looking at public limited companies is it's actually the most respected model generally. Because if you say I'm a PLC, they already know you have 50 grand sat down, you've got all sorts of red tape, making sure you're behaving yourself. So already, it's like most other companies and most people take it seriously. Most PLCs have PLC in the name. So you've got Tesco PLC, Lloyds Bank PLC. And I think that's the only 2 main things I want to mention. So when it comes to like the paperwork and the administration of a public limited company, it is the highest of the ones we're going to talk about today. There is another one that is almost equally as complicated, which is the charity, but we're not talking about charities today. But public limited companies are usually the most tricky and the most busy when it comes to paperwork. Does anybody have any questions on public limited companies? Well, I'm sorry, I'm going for long. I'm almost finished, don't worry.
Not to worry at all.
Okay, I'm going to keep going. So next one, and this is the last, we've got the last 2, is, 2 in a bit, is private limited companies. So it's very similar, very small differences with a public limited company. But with a private limited company, You have a separate legal entity, again, that exists in shares and is owned by shareholders. Same structure. Again, the company is liable for its own debts, and the profits belong to the company and can be distributed as dividends. This is the most popular option for starting a business in this country, period. No, I take that back. Sole trader is the most popular option, actually. But when you get to a certain point, most people opt for this. So most people go with sole trader for ease. But if your exposure is a bit more complicated, this is usually the go-to for most people. Now, when it comes to compliance, you deal with, again, HMRC and Companies House. You have to submit what's called a, so let me make sure I'm going to get it correctly. Yeah, you have to submit your accounts every year. You have to submit what's called a confirmation statement. And you have to update, like, Companies House on if you change your name, change address, anybody else has got shares. You have to also keep, for accounting purposes, you have to have a registered address where you keep the details of the business as well. So there's a bit more compliance, a bit more administration to do with this particular option, very similar to a public limited company compared to if you're a sole trader or if you're a partnership. Yeah, so again, sometimes the compliance for these, oh, not sometimes, the compliance for these are generally a bit more complicated. Accounts need to be submitted every year. So you have to submit accounts to Companies House, but you also have to submit accounts to HMRC when you're paying your corporation tax. Of course, they can be the same, but sometimes the information slightly differs depending on what you're doing. So you have to be aware that you're kind of doing a lot more paperwork than all the others. To start, you have to register with Companies House as well, which is much more difficult, more costly than just letting HMRC know. There are little costs and things that pop up that may require a bit more attention when you're this particular option. Other factors to consider. Other factors to consider is most shareholders who start the company will be directors also. So within the relationship of a limited company, private limited company, you have shareholders who own the company, you have directors who run the company. Most people who start will be both the shareholder and the director of the business. But you must understand, as a director, you're usually working voluntarily. And as a sole trader, sorry, not sole trader, as a shareholder, that's the element in which you have the money in the business because you own the shares in the business. So this goes back to the whole employment situation. When you have a limited company, you have to work out, how am I going to pay myself? Am I going to be a employee, set up PAYE, set up payroll, and pay myself as an employee? But in order to do that, you have to set up an employee contract for yourself. There has to be some sort of clear income coming in, if that makes sense. Or are you going to pay yourself as a sole trader, which means you're going to be a contractor to your own business? So as a limited company by shares, you often have three hats. You have yourself as a sole trader, you have yourself as a director, and you have yourself as a contractor who's being paid for the work they're doing. Let's say you're a hairdresser, you're paying yourself for the hair, but as a director, you're running the business, doing the promotion, doing all the paperwork, and then as a shareholder, you own the name and the assets and the profit. So again, it gets a bit more complicated when you get to this particular stage versus being a sole trader where it's all just you. Yeah. Again, there's a special contract between companies and shareholders. So you're an employee when you're a shareholder, and this is a standard for many industries. If you want to get, as I mentioned earlier, if you want to get involved in fashion, if you want to get involved in food, if you want to get involved in certain tech industries, you couldn't show up as a sole trader. You could try, but it's very unlikely Deliveroo is going to accept you on Deliveroo as a sole trader. If you've got the right certificates and you've got certain things in place, probably they may, but generally, a lot of companies are looking to see if you're a registered company. The reason why is because they can investigate you a bit more. They can see if you've got any assets in the company. They can see where the company's registered. There's a bit more transparency when you're a limited company than when you're a sole trader. So people trust them a bit more. Any questions on being a limited company by shares?
Okay, so there's no, I've got a question here from Facebook. It's not on this specific slide. So it's from SJ Rose from Facebook. Is there a business structure which offers the most stability but minimal tax burden? What is the best business structure that offers the minimal, the most stability, but also minimized tax burden?
So again, whew, what she's asking for is, interesting because tax burden is an interesting question. So limited companies are the most tax efficient if they're done correctly. However, being efficient requires you to probably go to an accountant to help you work out how to be the most tax efficient. It's not by default. You have to stand a bit more to do it. So although it's the most tax efficient, which essentially can mean you're paying less depending on what you're doing, it's also the most work when it comes to making that happen. If that makes sense. So, but it's also the most stable. But then if you just want to be, if we're just looking at it plainly, often a sole trader is usually easier. So if we look at them just side by side on their own, for example, a sole trader is more easier tax than a limited company. But limited company, by virtue of being a limited company, has more opportunities for you to be more tax efficient if you know how. Does that make sense, Tony? So it's like, if you know how, a limited company could be more tax efficient than a sole trader. But if you don't know how, just be a sole trader because you're going to give yourself so much trying to do it without an accountant. And then stability, though, again, limited company offers more stability, but the stability needs to be managed by the paperwork you do, by the way you keep your files, and so on and so forth. So it offers more stability because your liability is limited. Banks are more you, accounts with you. Like everyone takes you a bit more seriously. I think they're a bit more smoother with a limited company. However, you have to. It's harder to manage in a social. So it's like if you're ready for the work, yeah, definitely limited company. But sole trader is just as good as option. Sorry, just as good an option. Got a question from Daniel who said, "What would you suggest for a structure?" Daniel, you'd have to explain to me what you mean by football business because that's vague. I don't know. You talk about
Okay, so Daniel, I think I'm going to
and
let you speak so that you can ask your question a bit more clearly.
Okay, so while I say, Daniel, let me just finish I've only got one more structure to do, which is the last one, and then we can go into a bit more questions about the different questions people might have. So, is by guarantee. Now, this is for those who are a bit more interested in doing, like, what's the word I'm trying to use? Social enterprises. Yeah. So usually I would cover charities, social enterprises, CIC, CIOs, the different options of charitable options, but can't give you everything today because of time. So again, just head over to cambly.com, join our groups, follow us and whatever, and you get more details about the other trainings we're doing covering more other areas, right? But I'm gonna just touch on the top of all of them is this. Now, a private company by guarantee. So the other one is private company by share, which means the company exists in shares as a separate entity. But by guarantee, there are no shares. It exists in guarantees, which is just promises, for lack of a better word. So it doesn't have shareholders, it has members. Yeah. The company is liable for its own debts, so it's still limited, you're still protected, and the profits belong to the company. So because you don't own it by shares, sorry. Yeah, I'm gonna put it up in a moment, hopefully. Oh, my PowerPoint just vanished. Okay, I'm here. Because you don't own it by shares, profit distribution is a bit more complicated and is generally not done within a private limited company by guarantee. People set up to be social enterprise. So if you want a social enterprise, you report to HMRC and Companies House just like you would with a company by shares. But if you wanted to become a charity, you could then serve with Charities Commission and have a limited company by guarantee that was a charity, which is what a lot of people do. You still have to pay corporation tax. However, if you register as a charity, there's a way especially gets that removed, right? So there are tax ways to get that removed. This is a very option for not-for-profit organizations, and as I mentioned, can be registered as charities. So just to read the question, when you guys are considering what do you want? Do I want a sole trader? Do I want to be a partnership? Do I want to be a PLC? Do I want to be a limited liability company? Do I want to be limited by shares or limited by guarantee? So again, legal structure. So that's what we talk about your particular question. Think about for yourself the legal structure. Do I want to be the business? Probably not. If you're going to have a team, for example, you probably want the business to be a separate legal entity that other people can get involved in and buy into and own as well. Again, compliance, reporting. Do you really want to be doing all the paperwork? But again, you've got to weigh it up. Is the paper more important than the opportunity for other people to buy in? Then tax. What tax needs to be paid? Why? Tax shouldn't be really much of an issue if you're going to be making enough profit. Liability. How much exposure is what you're doing? Can people get hurt? Can things be damaged? Can people lose money in what you're doing? If the exposure is high, you might want to minimize your liability by registering as some kind of corporation. Profit sharing. Do you want profit? Do you want profit to go back into the community? Should you be a limited by guarantee? Do you want to raise profit? Are you happy to only have the money that you bring in? Because again, if you're a sole trader or a partnership, it's harder to raise profit. And then last but not least, are there any other factors that I've mentioned today that you're thinking, that's something I have to think about, that's something I have to consider? Just very quickly, I was asked to put up the socials. You can pop me an email. Our number is there if you want to join our WhatsApp group. If you just go to, I'm just going to put it in the chat, cambly.com. We're actually currently in the middle of rebuilding our website, so it's weird. When they told me when the website, so I'm going to be doing this event with no ready website, but that's a matter we move. Still, pop over to the website. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, on everything. I think our handle is Ken Blue Business, which is spelled like this. Yes, that's spelled correctly. But if you're in any doubt, you can pop over to the email, to our website. You can watch our vlogs up there. You can join our WhatsApp group. I'd like to see some people pop into that network. We have lots of black businesses in there that we talk about different things and we try to support each other and provide information. So if you want to join a network of black businesses that are building themselves, please feel free to connect to that by going to our website. Now, I guess it's question time. So, like you said, Daniel, if you want to come on, Todd, if you can give him an opportunity, we can have a brief chat about what Daniel was asking about.
Awesome. So, Daniel, I'm going to allow you to speak now. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Hi, Daniel, are you still there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, no, so I was just talking in regards to basically,
Yeah, we can hear you, Daniel.
Sorry, I was basically talking about, so you were talking about the sole trade and the legal side of it. So what would be your best advice in terms of running like a full team? What would you advise in terms of the sole trade or the partnership aspect of it?
So what's the business you said? Is it a football team?
Yes.
So again, thinking about things I've been talking about today, is this something that you'd want to be able to raise profit with? Raise capital, sorry? Would you want to be able to get investors and get people to invest in it and to buy into the idea a bit more?
Yes, I would.
So for example, from that, generally I wouldn't lean towards sole trader or
okay,
or a partnership with something like that. Because again,
what would you?
Company by guarantee or share, but probably by shares, because you want to be able to raise capital you want to be people in the community or other people in other areas to invest. Do you intend to make profit from it? Is it something you want to be able to feed yourself with? Enough money to live off? Oh, Daniel, you've gone?
Sorry, Daniel, I muted you there, but unmute yourself again. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Can you hear me now again?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, so I'll be able to obviously make profit and obviously be able to pay myself. Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so then you'd have to probably consider a limited company of some sort, because again, you could work it as a sole trader.
Mm-hmm.
As a sole trader, especially if you're, how old would your players be? Were you working with young kids? Are you working with
Under
adults?
23s at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. So because you're going to be having multiple contracts with, for example, the players, that's a
Mm,
lot of exposure you're putting on yourself as an individual. So you're gonna
mm,
have contracts with whatever leagues you're involved with. Contracts. There's a lot of contracts you're gonna have. They're all gonna be connected to you as an individual,
yeah, yeah.
which can be very messy. You know, your kit, your
Okay.
sponsors, your.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
in reality, I can almost tell you hands down, not to touch a sole trader when it comes to team. The thing about a team as a sole trader, it means if you vanish, team's gone because it's you.
Yeah.
However, as a limited company, of course, if you vanish, they still have to do something about that. But it's almost as though they can still kind of continue because it's an entity in itself rather than just use an individual. That
Okay,
makes
yeah.
sense.
Okay.
Um,
So do I need to be like company
Partnerships.
house and all of that stuff?
Well, yes, you'd have to go to company's house again. If you go to my website or the number on is the number still on the screen? I don't see the screen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you go to the number on the screen, just send me a WhatsApp message. I can give you a bit of
Okay.
direction as to exactly how to kind of do that.
Yeah, the
But you just need
legal
to
side, yeah.
understand,
Because I want to get that right, yeah.
but you need to understand the kind of relationship you're going to have. So if you're going to be in a limited company, for example, you're going to be a shareholder, you're going to be a director, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like you're going to own the company as a shareholder. And I always say, imagine you have a child. As a shareholder, you're
Mm.
the parent. You're the person who, we don't own our kids, but you know what I mean. You own the child.
Yeah, 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 of course,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
but then as a
understand.
director, you're like the nanny. So when
Yeah.
a parent goes to work every day, it's the nanny that does the day-to-day running of the child. However, when it comes to major decisions or major things that happen, it's the parent who decides.
Mm.
That makes sense. So if the
Yeah,
child
I get you.
was going to make, if the child, was given £1 million, it's not the nanny that's going to touch the money, it's the parent they're going to give it to. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, kind of have that kind of in your mind. You would essentially be looking after the business as a director, you own the business as a shareholder, then you'd have to work out how will I be paid. That makes sense. So how you will pay yourself is a big question. Because if you're going to pay yourself as a contractor, as I mentioned, you'd have to become a sole trader as well as a limited company. If you want to set up here, if you've got the money to set up PAYE and get an accountant to do all that for you, then you can become an employee of your own business. It depends on your pocket, to be honest, if I'm completely honest with you. It depends on your pocket and how much money is coming into the business as well.
Okay, cool. But I can't see further
Um,
anyway to get a bit more direction, yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah, thank
well,
you.
and my phone has not vibrated, so don't know what you're waiting for. No, I'm
Oh,
joking. I'm joking.
Awesome, awesome, and I'm sure that Shaya would be available for one-to-one coaching as well. As outside of the webinar. So I'm sure that if you really want to go in depth in terms of how you want to structure your business, like mentioned before, Shaya actually runs a consulting on this. So if you want to want that one-to-one coaching, please feel free to reach out to Shaya. So some of the website, the social media handles, and Shaya's details as well, I will forward it to everyone so that everyone has them and can reach out to Shaya directly. Okay. Any other questions, guys? Okay. So this has been very, very amazing. Shaya, thank you so much. We
Are you
really,
sure
really
you're not just saying that,
appreciate
Tolu? You were just quiet the whole time. Are you sure you did?
it's been really, really amazing and very, very detailed, very informative as well. So please do stick around. I'm just going to quickly we're going to move to the second phase of today's session. I'm going to kind of breeze through this and just talk about the fundraising side of things as well and how we would work to help you with that. So if I just quickly share my screen.
Sorry, can I turn off my camera now?
Yes, go ahead. Can you all see my screen? Okay. So what I would say here at this session is that just because I want to quickly run through this very, very quickly, if you don't mind just pausing the questions for now, and then I'll come to the questions immediately we finish so that we have enough time to discuss, if that's okay with everybody. So I'll just share my screen again here. Okay. Awesome. So in terms of the fundraising side of things, so there are a few ways that we can help you. And this is by no means an exhaustive a form of an exhaustive list. This is just a few ways that you're able to raise funds as well. So one of the ways is the startup loans. The startup loans is mainly UK based. You also have the small business administration loan as well, and that's mainly for the US. You have crowdfunding. I've explained that a bit more. You have venture capitalists and traditional bank loans. So in terms of traditional bank loans, I'm sure everybody has some good knowledge about them. You know, going to your traditional bank, probably a bank that you already have a relationship with, to get a loan to start up your business. And in most cases, they want to see that there's some money that you yourself are putting in to towards that business as well. And in some cases, they may actually they'll ask for collateral, and sometimes you may need to use your house, equity on your house as collateral for the loan. But I'm not going to speak about that at all. I'm just going to give that brief summary on that. So in terms of the startup loan is actually a government-backed loan. So the government is actually working through other financial institutions, like for example, I know Virgin Finance does that, and several other businesses as well. Financial institutions provide these loans, and you can borrow between 500 to 25,000 pounds. And the good thing about this is, speaking in respect to the legal structure that Shayo spoke about, you can get it as a sole trader. You can also get it as a limited company, and even in addition to that, each director within the limited company can actually get their own startup loan towards that specific business. So it's not just given to the business itself, it can actually be given to each director as well. So that's a good way of you raising additional funds, but you'll be able to raise between 500 to 25,000. So for example, some of the things that we've seen people do is that, for example, they might, if they feel like they have a limited chance of getting a higher amount, they might split the money between the two directors. So if they need 20,000, for example, each of the directors may go for 10,000 each, just to make up that 20,000, if that makes sense. And there is a fixed interest of 6% per year. Is usually payable within the first 5 years of business as well. You have a 12 months free mentoring as well. So you have a business advisor that will be assigned to you during your first year of business, or first year of you receiving the loan, to kind of guide you and to make sure that you are working, to help you to ensure that the business is successful. And like I said before, it's based in the UK. Now, one of the things just to clarify is that even though they can help you to run international, they can sponsor some of your international projects, but your main operations need to be based in the UK. So that just needs to be very, very clear. Now, some of the requirements is that you actually have to have a good credit, because they're going to do a credit check on you. I'm not sure if it's a soft credit check or a hard credit check. I can confirm that later on and then get back to everyone on that. You need to have a business plan. So depending on the organization that you're going with, some of them would actually give you a template for you to follow through. And this is actually some of the ways that we will be able to help you in terms of preparing you for the loan. We will be able to guide you in terms of how you can apply, because we're actually developing a partnership with one of the financial institutions that provides the startup loan. And that's an area where we'll be looking to help anyone that is interested. You also need to develop a cash flow forecast and financial statement. Now, in terms of the business plan, I really must stress that this is a document that I know many people usually go to a consultant to help them to, or an accountant to help them to draft a business plan, but this is a document that you would need to own yourself. I was speaking to one of the advisors within the financial institution I mentioned before, and one of the things they said is that they prefer that the owner of the business actually writes their business plan themselves. And the business plan, we need to move away from the old mindset of it being a 50 page or a 100-page document. It's just sometimes it can just be in a template that gives a detailed description of your business and the feasibility study for your business as well. They might also need financial statements, so both personal financial statements and financial statements for the business if the business is already operating but less than but is not operating more, has not been operating longer than 2 years. So they might need some financial statement as well in that respect. So, and it's all they might ask you for more information depending on the outcome of your credit check. So that's something that you need to bear in mind. Now, the small business loan, it has different variations, so they can actually give you a loan, or there's an investment option as well. They also provide grants as well. So grants, they are not necessarily loans, but just more additional funding for your business. Now, in terms of the loan side of things, you can actually get more with them. You can get between $500 to 5.5 million. The rates are also very, very competitive as with the UK version. You also get ongoing support, so it's not just limited to the first year of you receiving the loan. However, in this the difference here is that there's actually a down payment, but there is still no you don't have to have collateral as with the startup loan as well. There is no collateral, but they want you to put some form of a deposit or a down payment to show your own financial commitment as well. This is how it works. So similar to the startup loan, the SBA do not provide the loan directly. So they work with different partners to get the loan to you. So it might be banks or other financial institutions to get you the loan. Now, the other version that they have is the investment. So the investment is broken down into three. You have the debt investment. So that is effectively a loan as well. You can get between $250,000 and $10 million. The interest is between 9% and 16% as well. Then there is the equity. So they will actually own a share of your business. So reflecting back on what Shayo had mentioned, that means that you probably be looking at the limited liability structure if you are in the US, or if the variation of that in the US as well. So in that sense, and you'll be able to raise between $100,000 and $5 million with that particular option. Now, there is also a hybrid version where you can have both kind of like, how we have this shared ownership scheme in the UK, where you're paying part rent, part mortgage. In the same way, some of the money that's been advanced to you would be a debt, and another part of it would be some form of an equity. I know that can be a bit murky sometimes, but it's also an option depending on just to create some form of flexibility there as well. And you can get between $250K, $50,000 and $10 million. A particular option. Again, so it's like more or less like a pot. So sometimes you also get like private investors that put money in there, and for every dollar, I believe they match it with $2. So that's something that you need to also bear in mind if you are in the US. So like I said, the SBA is limited to the US. The startup loans is limited to the UK. So the grants, so they offer, they don't necessarily offer grants themselves. Again, they kind of like work as a bridge. So they help you to kind of navigate the market to identify different organizations that might be willing to fund your business. But some of the key areas that they focus on, especially the SBI, the Small Business Innovation, they fund scientific research and development projects. So if your business is science-based, for example, then they can help you to get specific funding for that. Also, if you are into exports, they work through the territorial government to provide funding for businesses that have export development as well. So that's another area. So for example, if you want to do exports to Africa and so on and so forth, that might be an avenue for you to be able to raise funding. Another area where we can help you, and I actually have some experience here as well, is the crowdfunding. So crowdfunding is more or less a kind of a community investment. In most cases, they are not necessarily investing for shares. In most cases, they are actually just investing as a form of support. So it's more or less, in some cases, it's more or less a donation than an investment. They are just kind of pulling funds together. Imagine, so I think a way where you can think about it is some people living together in the same house, saving money together to help to put down for a down payment for somebody to buy a mortgage, to get a mortgage to buy a house, and so on and so forth. So that's how crowdfunding kind of works. So I think it was in 2015 when I published on one of my books. I did a crowdfunding campaign to raise a few £1,000s to get my book out there as well. And one of the ways that I did it was, so for example, you might say that, okay, if you give me X amount, I will give you a gift, for example. That's another way that you can look into it as well. But in some cases, you can actually do it as an equity investment. So there are companies like Crowdcube and Seeders, and I think some other companies as well, that they can facilitate that. So these companies will actually stand as proxies for those who have contributed into that pot and represent them in your organization. So they actually have shares within your business. And another way you can do it is as some form of as a cash advancement. Now, this in itself is almost separate from crowdfunding, in that it's a form of financial, a form of is a way of you raising seed capital in itself. But you can also use it in the crowdfunding scheme, in the sense that, for example, you can say that, okay, if you put down £100, $100, for example, we would give you this would it would be more or less like a pre-order of our product or of our service. For example, I know someone did, I think Bianca Miller, when she was doing her own crowdfunding campaign, that was the kind of the mechanism that she used. So that's something that you might want to consider as well. But one of the things that we can do is that we'll be able to provide you with some guidance and coaching on the best way to run a crowdfunding campaign, because it's more or less like a marketing campaign to get people interested in your business, because and also to believe in you. The people who are going to take part in this form of seed fundraising would be people who actually believe in your business. They believe in you as well. So that's something that you need to bear in mind. Now, venture capitalists is another way of raising funds. Now, these are usually experienced, wealthy people who have either run several businesses themselves, or maybe they are very experienced professionals that have a lot of cash or liquid cash that they are looking for places to invest in. So one of the approaches that they take is that sometimes they may have like a wide portfolio, where just to kind of spread their risk as well, and then they invest in these different areas. So they're like angel investors. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with the angel investors network. So people like that, so they usually have like a threshold of, okay, they're looking to invest maybe between, some of them might be looking to invest between £1 to £500, £500,000, for example, and some of them are looking to go in the millions. So I think what Alan Sugar does, kind of is a way of venture capitalism as well. So it would help you. They kind of, and it's almost like a mentoring scheme as well. So they are not just investing in your business; they're also investing in you, and with their investment, in most cases, also comes with their partnership as well. So like Dragons, then when you go and you see them, they pitch to investors. In most cases, the reasons why those investors will put their money in there is because they have industry experience in the area that that entrepreneur is going into, and they can see how their connections can be leveraged to help to build that business as well. And depending on the level of risk or the level of input that they feel that they might be putting in there, they might put in your business, not just in terms of their money, but in terms of their time and their connections as well. That would determine the level, the profits that they would be asking for. So this is actually a very, very tricky way of raising funds. This is actually, when you get into partnership with a venture capitalist, you're literally inviting somebody to come and live with you. So you need to know the kind of person this venture capitalist is. What is their appetite? You need to do your own background research to see what are the things they've invested in before. What was their relationship with the people that they invested in, and how did it all turn out? Because sometimes a venture capitalist may actually look for opportunities to take over your business. So you need to know if it's not someone that fundamentally believes in what you're trying to do, then you might, even though they might have the money to help you to do it, it might not be the best suit for you. So it can be a very murky relationship, but it can be something that would help you to grow your business exponentially. So I think that's everything here in a nutshell that I just want to share with you all. So I don't know if there are any questions on this. Okay, so like I said, the areas where we will be able to help you and provide a lot of guidance is the startup business loan for the UK side of things, and the crowdfunding side of things as well. We're more than happy to provide any information that is available to us on the other ways of raising capital as well, and provide you and see how we can connect you with other people as well that might be able to provide even deeper insight. In terms of the venture capitalist side of things, one of the things that we are actually working on is to kind of create a community of investors, especially Black investors as well, so that we can start building Black-owned enterprises as well. So that's one of our goals that we're looking to achieve in the near future. So any questions? Okay.
Just Tolly, just to throw it out there, let me know when you want some contacts. I have a few Black investors who would definitely be interested in supporting that. So I have quite a few, to be honest. So definitely we'll talk later about that particular element.
That's very awesome, Shayo. Thank you very much for that. So any questions, guys? Okay, so if there are no questions on this, I would like to say a very big thank you to everyone for taking part in this webinar session, and look forward to seeing you next week. So next week is going to be really, really awesome. We're going to have a number of panelists, very experienced entrepreneurs who will be coming in. And I know that some of the speakers who have spoken before, just as they've been joining us, like Pastor Yomi Odukoya, Mrs. Miriam Shonaya as well, would be joining us as well. And then you can ask them questions. Mr. Femi Okutubo is here with us, so he will be one of the panelists as well. And he's been running a business now for the past 25 years, and has served on the board of several charities. So it's a very experienced entrepreneur and professional as well. So please start sending your questions. Please start sending in your questions so that we have them in time. So it's going to be mainly a question and answer session. We might have a motivational talk at the end by Action Jackson, but it's going to be mainly a question and answer sessions where all the things that we have discussed today, you can actually ask people who are always doing these things as well, and then get more clarity as well. So in terms of things that you may have heard before, maybe questions you've asked that you want to even ask a bit more in detail. So that will be a platform for you to ask those questions. So if there are no questions here, I look forward to seeing you all same time next week, 6 p.m. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye now.